Here's an adorable winter scene that you can easily paint in Procreate. In this video, I'll show you how, and the techniques you'll learn are super flexible and you'll be able to use them for painting all kinds of storybook-style landscapes. You can follow this technique with any brushes you're comfortable with, but I'll list the exact ones I'm using in the description. And as you can see, I've already got the rough sketch placed in here, and if you want, you can download this sketch for free in the description. I've just placed it in here as the very top layer, and then I set the transparency mode to multiply. And to start painting, I need to make a background wash first, so I'm going to grab the abstract round brush and a very light powdery blue tone, and I'm just going to do a side-to-side wash like this that somewhat avoids the mountains. After that, I'm going to grab the eraser brush, which is set to the fine liner pen, and I'm going to use this to cut out the silhouette of the mountains. Next, I want to add a shadow on this distant mountain so it's kind of three-dimensional. So I'm going to grab the abstract round again, same powdery blue tone, and I'll just paint kind of an area like this. Then I'm going to grab the water blender, and I'll use it to blend just the top of this. Then I can use the eraser brush to cut back the bottom of the shadow so I have a sharp edge. Next, I'm going to add some snow kind of blowing in the sky. So I'll make a blank layer above my background. I'm going to change my brush to the stippling brush at the top of the watercolor brushes. I'll use pure white, and I'll just add some snow like this. And after that, I'm going to add the sun. So I'll make another blank layer. I'm going to use a slightly warm off-white, and I want this to have a cool texture to it. So I'm going to use a scratchy brush called Little Pine. And I'm just going to scribble in the sun like this. Then after that, I'm going to change to pure white, a larger brush size, and I'm going to kind of solidly fill out the center of the sun. After that, I'm going to continue with this scratchy Little Pine brush, and I'm going to add some detail to the road down here. So again, I'll make another blank layer, and I'm just going to use a couple different shades of this kind of pale blue tone, and I'll add some lines on the road. Just kind of as if cars were driving by and then leaving some ruts in the snow. And the reason I did these lines on their own layer is because I want to control the strength of that effect by lowering the opacity of that layer. And once I'm happy with how the whole background looks, I'm going to merge all the background layers together onto one just to keep the layers panel organized. Next, we can move on and do the houses. So they're going to be on their own blank layer above the background. For the brush, I'm going to start with the Aurora Quill brush, and I'm just going to use any kind of random pastel tone to kind of fill out the sides of the house, just every part of the house except the roof. And I'm doing this kind of loosely and abstractly, using a lot of strokes, just because I like this kind of overlapping texture. After that, I'm going to choose a darker tone, anything that'll stand off from the main color, and I'll use this to paint the windows. And then I'll finish up the windows by changing my brush to the fine liner pen, and something close to pure white, and I'll use this to draw the window frame. And now for the roof of the house, it's a little bit different. I'm going to change my brush to the hard edge round. I'm going to use a cold gray tone, something just a little bit off-white, and I'll go over it like this. Then I'm going to change to pure white, and I'm just going to do a bunch of vertical strokes just across the whole roof. And this brush can be a little bit unpredictable, and it'll change the color slightly as you paint. And the finishing touch, of course, is the chimney. And I'm just going to use a warm brown tone and add the chimneys like this. And I'll continue using the same process to paint the remaining 4 houses. And with the houses finished, I can move on and paint all the trees, and these are super simple. I'm going to make sure they're on their own layer. For the color, I'm going to use a pretty deep dark emerald tone, and for the brush, I'm going to use the hard edge. And the process for all of them is the same. I'm just going to create a kind of tapering stroke like this. Then I'll go along each side and do the branches. And I'm going to repeat the same process and do all the trees. Now this next step is optional, but if you want to, you can add a little bit of snow to the trees. So for that, I'm going to use pure white, same hard edge brush that I did the trees with, and I'm just going to draw some lines and dots like this. And at this point, the scene is really starting to look good. Before I move on and add the skiing people, I want to paint on the roads real quick. So those are going to be on their own layer, but I'm going to drag it all the way down here below the houses, but above the background. I'm going to try to do a long press to grab the background color again. I think I can continue with the hard edge brush, and I'm going to paint on the roads like this. And with those finished, we can finally move on and paint the people. And if you look over here on the right side, I've sketched out 3 people, and we're going to paint them over here and then arrange them on the landscape later on, kind of like stickers. And painting these guys is super simple. I'm going to make sure each skier is on its own layer above the trees. And for the brush, I'm just going to use the fine liner pen to do everything. And I'm basically going to choose a key color, in this case a kind of a yellowy orange tone. And I'm just going to fill out all the details using a few different shades. So for example, the torso is one color, the arms are a slightly different shade, and usually the legs are going to be a little bit darker. Then for the skis and the ski poles, I'm going to choose a very different tone, somewhat randomly, a kind of a very light version of it. Same fine liner pen, but maybe a little bit smaller, and I'll use it to draw those details. Then I'll finish them up by adding some boots, some gloves, I think a hat in this case, and then I'll use a skin tone to fill out the face. And I'm going to paint the other 2 skiers using this exact process, just basing everything off of kind of one key color, and I'm going to make sure each skier is on his own layer. And once the skiers are finished, we can turn off the sketch. We don't need it anymore. And I'm just going to use the arrow tool to arrange all 3 skiers onto the scene. And there we go. I think this looks really good. Before I move on and finish up this illustration, I want to look it over and see if there's any small adjustments I want to make. Mostly I'm looking at kind of balance and kind of density of the elements. This area looks great, but it's a little bit boring over here. There's not enough space to add another skier, so I think if I just enlarge this tree, I can kind of fill out that area. So I'm going to make sure the tree layer is selected. Then I can use the selection tool set to freehand. I'm just going to isolate that tree and then scale it up using the arrow tool. And once the scene is finished, all I've got to do to finish this up is kind of dress the edge and straighten everything out. Now the way I recommend doing that is making a blank layer above everything, using some pure white, and then some kind of scratchy brush. I love to use the 4B compressed charcoal brush, and I'm just going to use this to kind of go along the edge and paint over everything that goes too far, and I try to do this in a rough, somewhat rounded way. And just like that, our scene is finished. I'm really happy with how this one turned out, but next time I think I'd like to add some more distant mountains like the one in the middle. It turned out a lot better than I expected, and I really like how it looks. As always, here are 2 more landscape tutorials I recommend trying next, but before you go, don't forget to give this video a like.